Hello, you too, Mr. Mags here. Today, we will be asking the question, what if every Pokemon region had a fire type gym leader? Now, this is the first of the starter typings that I'm going to be doing in this video series. And creating the teams for this video was very interesting because unlike with the other typings, water and grass, Game Freak has always been, I would say, inconsistent when it comes to the fire types in any given region outside of the starter. With water and grass, there's seems to always be just a plethora of good water and grass options outside of the starter. Whereas with fire, there's seemingly either a lot of good options or almost no other options at all. So yeah, especially for the regions that already had fire gym leaders, it was honestly a lot of fun kind of theory crafting these teams here. So let's jump right into the criteria for how I develop these teams. First, the gym leader team and position will be chosen based on the fire types native to the region. So in this video in specific, I admittedly had to kind of cheat just a little bit with a couple of these teams because, like I said, there are certain regions that just had almost no options. And you'll kind of see down the line what I mean by that. But there's a couple here where I had to make a choice that I wasn't exactly fully confident in, but like it kind of allowed me to be a little more creative with just how I put the team together and like you'll see what I mean by cheating, but yeah, like I still created teams that I believed fit those regions well, fit the position that I put them in well, but as you'll see, some of them I could easily hear arguments against really making sense as like a real team that Game Freak would even consider making. Kind of in a similar vein, I used the version of the region with the most options. That was pretty much a requirement for something like Platinum, considering Diamond and Pearl literally only had two fire type options. So using Platinum there was literally required. But even then, there's a couple of other times when I still didn't have the most to work with. Next up, I will not be reusing any aces of any canon fire type gym leaders or Elite Four members in the region unless necessary. So for example, in for Kanto, I cannot use Arcanine since that was Blaine's ace, but in Johto, I can use Houndoom despite that being Karen's ace, since Karen was not a fire specific gym leader. So yeah, any major trainers outside of fire type, specific trainers, all of their Pokemon are fair game. And this next criteria here, I will only have four Pokemon that are type that are or only types that are starter specific. I will only be using starters if it's absolutely necessary and there are no other good options, at least especially ones that are native to the region. And lastly, the gym leader's overall strength will be based on the canon gym leaders of the region in question, if not slightly stronger. So average base stat total, team size, I'll try to kind of base it on, but especially when it comes to gens 5 and 6, considering the later gyms cap at 3, I feel like those should be, at least a little bit stronger. But again, those kind of go by a case by case basis. But generally, especially for the earlier gyms, I'll be making choices that put them to have a similar base stat total overall. Okay, starting with Kanto, and luckily Kanto is one of those regions that does have a pretty good amount of options, even outside of ones that were already aces. So I decided to make this the third gym with Vulpix, Ponyta, Magmar. And just like with all of these videos, the little trainer icon here is the NPC trainer in any given region that I felt fit the typing the best. I was kind of surprised that the like Kindler and Fire Breather trainer classes were only in a small handful of games. So again, I had to get a little creative with that, but just essentially the person here is someone who either what I felt represented the type best, or at least at some point used a fire type on their team. So um, yeah, I really like this team a lot. I think it'd be a pretty, close replacement for Lieutenant Surge's team. I like the Vulpix here, where it doesn't have the strongest output necessarily, but it does have the ability to out prioritize you with quick attack. It can confuse you with confuse ray, and I would also like it to have Will-O-Wisp. So especially if you only have water and other special attacks, it's probably not going to go down with one hit because it is, for a first stage Pokemon, fairly specially bulky. So it's probably going to get at least one status off on you. And then Ponyta, I wanted one Pokemon that was definitely more physical based, and Ponyta fits the bill very nicely. At that point, Stomps and Flame Wheels, assuming you're in a version of Kanto where it can learn Flame Wheel. I'm kind of surprised it didn't learn it until Platinum, but whatever. Um, it would definitely help round out the team to have one Pokemon that at least has a decent output with physical moves. And Magmar is just a Pokemon that I think screams ace material, especially for a mid-range gym leader like this. So I'd like it here. Next up, we have Johto, and I think this would work as the sixth gem with Magcargo, Magmar, Houndoom. Now, in this specific instance, I did decide to up the team average just a little bit because I always thought that Jasmine had just a woefully weak team. Those two Magnemites are really bringing down the average. So I think keeping him with only three Pokemon, and these are all Pokemon that either are from Gen 2 or evolve from Gen 2 Pokemon with Magmar, and it will not be the last time Magmar shows up. He's just a very popular guy. Um, yeah, Houndoom, you know, he's already been the ace of two other major trainers in Johto, so I thought I would continue the trend and make him the ace of this fighter gym. Next up, we have Hoenn. And this is the first of the choices that, like I said, I had to get a little creative with because there are exactly three new fire types introduced in Ruby and Sapphire. Those being Blaziken, Torkoal, and Camerupt. Blaziken, I don't really want to use a starter as an ace unless absolutely necessary. Torkoal is already the ace of Flannery, so I can't use that right now. And then Camerupt it just didn't really feel like a gym leader ace material. I don't know, just something about that just didn't work in my head. And even if it did, it'd be kind of hard to build the rest of the team out because even outside of those three I listed, the only other fire option is the Slugma line, if you're not counting Primal Groudon, obviously. Um, so it just I just was having trouble piecing that team together with Camera being the ace. So I made a choice that again I don't necessarily 100% like and confident in, but I think it is still a lot of fun, and I'm still working within the confines of here is a technically another fire type option for Hoenn. So I made this as the first gym with a Numel and a cast form. Now, cast form has the opportunity to become a fire type if the sun is out. Cast form does have 70 base stats across the board, and I could maybe hear an argument for that being slightly too strong for a first gym. However, it's still a cast form. It's not this one. I'm theory crafting and not really having any coverage moves. I think it's just with just no Sunny Day, Ember, or whatever fire TM that it can learn that that he would give, and then tackle. So, a stab for when he's a cast form, a stab when he's the sun form, and then the ability to become the sun form. So I think if there is a concern about him being slightly too strong for the first gem, um, those games actually set a precedent for having a trade Pokemon available before the first gym with the Makuhita or the the C dot in Emerald, specifically to give the player a good option into Roxanne. So I think having a Giovanni, or say a Geodude, sorry, a Geodude, or some other rock or ground type from the region, or even like a Barboach or something like that that would be able to handle this cast form if you need it. So yeah, I could also hear an argument for this being potentially second gym material, especially if you added on a Slugma, but I don't know. I just for some reason really like the idea of this, especially considering weather is just such a important aspect of the region as a whole. I kind of like the idea of the weather gimmick Pokemon and the weather as a whole being present in the first gym. So yeah, I really like your thoughts about this specifically. Do you think this is too strong for the first gym? Um, do you like the idea of giving him a Barboach or a Geodude or something specifically to take it on? I'm curious about your thoughts. Sinnoh is another one that I had to get a little creative with because, like I said, Platinum kind of fixed the fire typing, but all it did was just allow more past gen Pokemon to be available in the Pokedex, but it didn't add any new fire types. So I really had to get creative with this one. And I think I liked my decision here. But this one is definitely cheating for a couple of reasons, and I'll show you the team I created. I made this the fifth gym, giving him a Monferno, the first and I believe only starter Pokemon that is in this entire presentation, a Magmar since it evolved into a Magmortar, but I can't use Magmortar since Magmortar and Infernape for that matter are both aces of the Fire Leaf 4 member in Sinnoh, and then Rotom Heat. So here's why this is basically pretty much cheating. So Rotom in the Sinnoh region is functionally a legendary. You in Diamond and Pearl, it is a post-game encounter. It literally has the legendary battle music. There's only one of them. It is treated exactly like a legendary does in Platinum, is given these crazy forms. So it's maybe a little weird that just a random gym leader, in the I'm fine with post-game fights having weird stuff like this, but in a main playthrough, fifth gym for him to have a Rotom, I could hear that being a little weird, but given the circumstances, I think it'll be okay. Another reason why I think this is pretty much cheating is I don't believe that there is a version of Sinnoh where you can have a Rotom Heat that is the fire type and also a Magmar in the same Pokedex. Because in Platinum, yes, they did add Magmar into the main Pokedex, but all of the Rotom forms in Platinum are just electric ghost. They didn't add the extra typings on until Black and White. But then in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, I don't think Magmar is in that main Pokedex. But even if it were, Rotom is still relegated to a post-game fight. So it's also not in the main Pokedex. So there's no version of Sinnoh where technically, as it stands, there's no version of Sinnoh where Magmar and Rotom Heat that is a fire type can be on the same team. But you know what? I think it's fun, especially since I decided to represent this as a scientist character. It just makes sense, I think, for the scientist to have a Rotom. I decided that this is fine, especially since Rotom is literally the only other technically the only other fire type introduced in Sinnoh outside of the evolved forms of the other two Pokemon on the team. So once again, I would like your thoughts on how you liked how I implemented this. Do would you have any other ideas for a fire uh gym in Sinnoh? I'd just like your thoughts about all that. Next up, Unova. This one I did not need to cheat for at all. Unova actually has a good amount of very powerful fire types. So I think this works as the sixth gem with Lampent, Heatmore, and Darmanitan. It is crazy to me that in all of Black and White, and I think Black and White too, there's not a single trainer that has Darmanitan as their ace Pokemon. Darmanitan just, for me, just screams ace material. It has the stats where, like, on paper, they're not the absolute highest. I think it caps at 480, but all of those stats are in attack and speed and actually has pretty decent HP. So the fire gem that it's holding will, and on top of its ability Sheer Force, will essentially act as a tactical nuke whenever it uses Flare Blitz onto anything that even resists it. Unless you quad resist like a Caracosta or something like that, that quads resist his Flare Blitz, you're going to be taking just a lot of damage from this thing using Flare Blitz on you. And then, on top of the other two Pokemon on our team, um, Lampent and Heatmore not being slouches either. I just think this makes for a very good uh fire gym, and it's kind of upsetting that they kind of used that chip with Chili in the first gym, but only certain playthroughs will even technically have a fire gym. I don't know. I feel like this region is just, I feel like one that was just primed to have a fire gym leader. It's one of, I think, the few flaws of Black and White 2 is that uh they didn't change up the gym leaders, and especially the Elite Fours, any more than they did. I think an Elite Four that is a fire type Elite Four, or even just a later gym like here that could have a Darmanitan as their ace, I think that would have been really cool. And even without that fire gym as an option, even though I do think it would be cool if all the Unova gym leaders had their type boosting gym, even without that gym, Darmanitan's, fire punches or flare blitzes, whichever they decide to give it, are still gonna just be absolutely devastating. Next up, Kalos, and we are gonna be pretending like in this version of Kalos that I'm creating this team for, we're gonna be pretending like either Lysander doesn't exist, like Team Flare is a different team, or um he just doesn't have an Ace Pyroar. So I guess his design would have to change. But regardless, either way, this character model here, he's one of the scientists on Team Flare. I legitimately feel like of all of the character models in all of Kalos, this is the one that looks most like a fire gym leader. So I'm rocking it. But I think this works for the fourth gym. We have Fletchinder, Simisear, Pyroar. Pyroar is unfortunately the only other fire type available in Kalos. As far as like new to Kalos, the other one being Talonflame, and that was already the ace of the Fire Elite Four member. If I had any other options, I would have gone with it, but because of how it is right now, you could either theory, you could like uh you could headcanon that maybe this guy, is a plant, as similar to the Malva in the Elite Four, where she at least, kind of was on Team Flare. Maybe this gym leader is a part of Team Flare and the league doesn't know it. You could headcanon that, or you could just, headcanon away that Team Flare doesn't exist and this guy just looks like a fire gym leader. Either way, I think Pyroar is the only other option. So I think it still does work as an ace of the gym leader. Next up, Alola, and Alola typically doesn't have gym leaders, so we just kind of took, you know, kind of how other major fights in the region were, and also kind of based it on the average of other gym leaders in other regions to create this, what I believe to be the fifth gym. And fun fact, this guy here, he's actually the firefighter class, which typically only uses water types. But in this instance, he's fighting fighter with fire with fire. So I think that's fun. So for the fifth gym, I think Torkoal, Alolan Marowak, and Turtonator would work very well. I can hear an argument for adding on a fourth Pokemon, maybe like the Fire or a Choreo, maybe, but I think this still works very well as a fifth gym. Uh, Gen 7 is the first generation that allowed Torkoal to have the drought ability. So I wanted to spotlight that here. Plus it would boost the fire moves of his other teammates. With it being the fifth gym and only having three Pokemon, I think this Alolan Marowak should absolutely have the Thick Club. Maybe even give it Flame Charge so that, assuming you don't take out in one hit, it uses Flame Charge on you. It now it's outspeeding you with just an incredibly high attack stat. You know, I hope you got something to resist it. And then Turtonator being part dragon is inherently going to be a little tricky to take out since it's not weak to water. So yeah, I think this is a solid team. Next up we have Galar. And I think this works as the seventh gym. Unfortunately, outside of starters, the only other fire um Gigantamax form was Colossal. I really like Colossal. I think it can work as the ace. It's already the ace of the canon sixth gym. Um, but that's part of the reason why this isn't going higher than eighth than seventh gym. Even though he does have Salazzle, Flareon, and Galarian Darmanitan, which is maybe arguably cheating since it's not going to be fire all the time, but it has the ability to become a fire type and become, even stronger than regular Darmanitan. So I think that's a lot of fun. I think it deserves to be here. Um, but even though I think Salazzle, Flareon, and Galarian Darmanitan could easily be eighth gym material, Colossal having two quad weaknesses to water and ground, on top of being weak to rock and fighting. Like, I don't know. I just don't think it should be higher than seventh. But this is, I think, still a very good seventh gym, especially in Galar, where for once they actually did make the gym leaders pretty strong. You know, considering in base Kalos or in base Galar, the fire gym that does exist, having Senses Scorch, also had a Ninetales and an Arcanine. All three of those make, I think, the highest average base stat total for any third gym. That's probably a higher average base total than most gyms across all of the entire franchise. So, given that, I think this works for a good seventh gym. Lastly, we have Paldea. And for the teams I create for Paldea, I like to make at least three different teams to essentially represent the three different ways that terrestrializing can be implemented. One being if it is of their type and it terrestrializes into their type to make their type moves even stronger. One if it is of their type and it terrestrializes into a different type to be offensively and or defensively strong into types that the team would normally struggle with. And then another one where it is a Pokemon not of their type that terrestrializes into their type, where the base Pokemon either kind of looks like it should already be that type or has a lot of moves that are already of that type, kind of like Sudowoodo and Crabominable, where Sudowoodo looks like a tree, it should be a grass type. Crabominable, a bunch of other uh, crab Pokemon are uh, are water type typically. They can learn stuff like Crab Hammer. So, you know, I really like I really like having these different options here. So, first, I think Fire is absolutely primed to be the eighth gem. And here I have Armarouge, Paldean Tauros, Camerupt, Scovillain, and a Ceruledge. And the Ceruledge translates into a fire type. You could even do something fun where the ace switches depending on which game you have. Either it's the one that you could get or the opposite of the one that you could get. Either way, I think that could be fun. I'm all for subtle changes like that on gym leader teams. So I think that could be a lot of fun. I could hear an argument for even taking away Camerupt and still being a pretty solid eighth gym. But considering I hadn't used Camerupt at all up to this point, um, I thought I would throw it on here. It's not necessary, but I want it to be somewhere. But if you think it'd be better if you think it would be just as good without it, I could hear him just having four Pokemon. So, but either way, I think this is a very good team. And the team where he translates into a different type, I am committing Armor Rouge to be the one here. And little tidbit here, I really like how the little like backpacker guy here, his coloring matches the ace that I picked. I think like this one, just the tones that he gives match Ledge, and then the tones of this guy match Armor Rouge. I think that's fun. But yeah, this Armor Rouge translating into a grass type who is now who now resists ground and water, which are two of fire's main weaknesses. You know, he one of his main weaknesses now is ice, which is something that you're not typically going to bring into a fire gym. And it can learn moves like energy balls, which will now be supercharged, which can now attack the the ground, rock, and water types that the team would normally struggle with. So I think this just all the pieces come together so perfectly for to the point where I wish there could have been something like this in the base game. And for the one where it's a Pokemon not of their type that translates into a fire type, I think Sunflora is a prime candidate for that. It's already you know, Sunflower is already fairly common, in lower tiers, obviously, to be on Sun teams anyway to fire off pretty powerful weather balls, whether it's solar power or chlorophyll. Either way, it's going to be better in the sun. And with this Scovillain also having chlorophyll, with it also being incentivized to set up the sun, by the time Sunflora comes in, firing off Terra boosted, sun boosted weather balls, I think that could be devastating. And this is the third gym, and I'm giving him four Pokemon, but I think it's fine for him to, especially since Carcadet and Carkol are not very strong. I think the relative strength of this team is similar to that of Iono's, if not even a little weaker, because none of them even come close to matching Miss Magius's strength. But yeah, I think this worked. Plus, I don't know, something kind of fun about all four of these. I would say not really being like typical fire types. Um, yeah, I think there's a very um there's a good variety of just design choices here. But I did create one other team that again is completely cheating, but I just couldn't let this opportunity pass. So yeah, one that is the fourth gym with Paldean Tauros, Scovillain, and Soul Rock that translates into a fire type. Now, the reason why this is cheating is because Soul Rock is not in the Paldean Pokedex. There is literally no way to use Soul Rock in any capacity in any Gen 9 game. However, Soul Rock is just one of those Pokemon that in my head has always been mistyped. I like the relatively unique, Psychic and Rock typing, but you know, Fire and Rock, Fire and Psychic, those are all also fairly unique. You can learn a lot of good fire moves. You can even have Lunatone be ice type. I know that not every Pokemon has to, not their types don't have to match what they look like aesthetically, but it just tickles my brain in a way that just makes so much sense. Like when I made Luxray a dark type, like when I made Blissey a fairy type in those videos, making Solrock a fire type, it just tickles that part of my brain that just feels like it's righting a wrong that is not incorrect, but it just feels right for him to be a fire type. So yeah, that's why I created the Sunflower team as well, just because this, is actually working within the confines of the game itself. And then this is if in a perfect world where, there wasn't any exclusions from the Pokedex, Soul Rock would absolutely work here. All right, thank you so much for watching. Please let me know down below what you thought about any of these teams. Are there any that you think you could add or change anything to improve them, or you think there's any Pokemon I forgot about? Um, Once again, I would just like feedback about those teams that I did kind of cheat on. Would would you do anything differently? Do you would you, kind of want stuff like that in the future? Like I said, yes, it is cheating a little bit, but also just, allow me to be a little more creative with that because otherwise I think those teams would just be kind of boring to me. So now they feel a lot better to me. So yeah, please let me know all that down below. Any thoughts, criticism, just general ideas for future videos. I'd like to hear all of it. So with that, we will see you all next time.